Okay, so hi everybody, and welcome to our series. This time on the subject today of funding, grassroots sports. We're very lucky because we've got a fantastic expert with us, certainly for the next 10-20 minutes, who's going to talk to us about funding. And so, without further ado, I'll introduce Caroline McRoyall. Caroline has a great background. She was with the Surrey FA as the chief executive for 5 years, and notably through a really important time with the Surrey FA. Caroline was involved in the development of a new headquarters, the Meadowbank football ground, which some of you may have heard of, in Mole Valley. Caroline was involved in that complete transformation, if you like, of the facility there and all of the funding, working with all of the various stakeholders that you need to work with to make those things happening. Needless to say, as a former CEO of the Surrey FA, Caroline has a really good understanding and broad kind of experience across everything grassroots football, and that includes stuff from the volunteering side to league, county level matches, administration, and so on. So I think if anyone knows about funding, it's Caroline. She loves the football as well. And if I'm right, Caroline, in August, you took on the role of chair at Tooting and Mitcham Football Club.
Yes, that's right.
Which, for those of you who don't know, is a non-league club. It runs teams for juniors, youth, adults, and their first team play in the Isthmian League. So again, Caroline's got a really good broad understanding of grassroots from kids all the way up to non-league football. And during Caroline's time, she's been heavily involved in grassroots football and understands the challenges that come with that. So, Caroline, that's the introduction done. Maybe it'd be good, maybe just to give a little bit more background as well as some of the other projects you're working on, just to give people a feel for the kind of things that you're doing at the moment.
Yes, thanks, Mark. It was a nice introduction. So obviously I've been was CEO of the Surrey FA for 5 years, and prior to that I actually worked for the county as the county development manager, so overseeing sort of all the facility projects in the county, and obviously working with clubs on funding. Since I left the Surrey FA, I actually set up my own business as a consultant, working with sports clubs with the aim of really trying to help them achieve their goals and get them to develop and grow. I've done a number of different projects since then, working with a couple of county FAs on youth strategy and also county cup sponsorship, and also working with a number of clubs on looking at facility projects. So, clubs looking to do new artificial pitches and looking at feasibility at that, as well as sort of funding for various community groups as well. So quite a wide range of projects, which is interesting and keeping me busy.
Yeah, I bet it is. And I mean, what an interesting time, to be involved in, in these things, right? Especially, hopefully, as we're all coming out of, what's been a challenging period at the end of March. So, as you know, Caroline, we're going to kind of split this into 3 different interviews. The first interview we're going to do is more about the funding aspects today. That's what we're going to focus on, because I know obviously you've got plenty of experience there. And hopefully some of the questions that I've got for you will be helpful for our members of our group, as well as the wider Love Admin membership as well. So without further ado, I'll start firing some questions at you, and I'll let I'll let you answer them. So the first one is, if you're a club or an organisation, where do you start with a funding strategy? If you haven't got one.
Yeah, I think that's a sort of kind of a daunting prospect for some people. The word strategy obviously conjures up sort of 50-page documents and lots of work, but it doesn't need to be that complicated. And I think it's just about having a clear idea of what you want funding for. And if there are a number of different items that you want funding for, what are your priorities? Because otherwise you will just end up chasing pots and pots of money and actually wasting a lot of time on stuff that you perhaps don't need to. So the first thing is just to have that conversation. Obviously, if you've already got a strategy or a club development plan, you'll have some key areas of what your priorities are and what you might need funding for that the club can't obviously currently cover as part of their membership. So once you've got those ideas, it's then starting to think about, okay, this is what we want funding for. This is kind of the amount of money that we want, because again, that will help you filter in terms of different types of applications. And then it's also thinking about, well, who's actually going to do the work? Who's going to complete those funding applications? And, making sure that the funding applications that you're going for are appropriate to you. And that they're at the right level, because sometimes you can spend a lot of time filling out applications for what might be only a small amount of money that actually won't help you achieve what you want to achieve. So it's just being a bit sort of smarter about your approach to funding.
Yeah. And what kind of resource, what kind of team typically do you need to make this successful? Because some clubs may have a relatively small committee, others a larger group. I mean, how many people typically, and what types of backgrounds do those committee members need to have to be able to help with the funding exercise?
Well, I think, essentially the discussion around what the priorities are and what you want funding for, can be your core committee, depending on, whatever size that is. So, predominantly your chairman, your secretary and your treasurer. If you're looking at obviously somebody that's going to complete the applications and drive them forward, then you really need somebody, one, that's got the time, and two, that has a little bit of expertise and has that knowledge around the club. So more of somebody that's sort of like a development officer type role, that will have that time to fill out those forms, that information. And obviously they'll need to pull information from the other committee members, such as the treasurer if you need to provide accounts, for example, or the secretary if you need to provide your constitution. So you do need it will be a team effort as such, but you'll probably have one specific person that will be doing the applications, but the decision making process obviously needs to be as part of that committee group.
Yeah. And sometimes does it involve actually bringing new people in that may previously have not been involved with the club? They may be a parent or somebody that has some history with the club. Have you seen that happen? Have you seen the actual committee group has actually grown because of the need for funding?
Yeah, I think that's sort of a key to have to look at. If within your committee you haven't really got anybody that's perhaps got that expertise or that time to do those applications, then it's definitely worth reaching out to your membership, or even outside. You may want to, for example, get a consultant in to do that sort of work for you. But it's just thinking about who has got that skill set and would be best placed to do it, because you don't necessarily want to spend loads of time completing applications on projects and not being successful. So it's having a looking at that side of things.
Yeah. No, I know, you've been quoted a few times as saying, don't forget also you got to sell your sport. The funding is there but nonetheless, I guess you still got to have your case, right? Your business case, and sell yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I think it really depends on what you're applying or who you're applying to. If you're applying if you're applying to a sporting body such as Sport England or a national governing body, then they obviously understand sport and get what it's about, and you don't necessarily have to demonstrate too much. But if you're applying to a general pot that may be open to community groups and charities, then you really need to demonstrate the wider benefits of sport. So thinking about, things like teamwork, like social cohesion, like improving people's mental well-being, reducing isolation, which is really important at the moment because of COVID, and, community engagement is thinking about all those sorts of things that, we all understand that sport provides us, and we all know, and that's why we love sport. Actually making sure we communicate that clearly in applications, and looking at what their key outcomes are for applications, and saying how sport will address that and how your project will address that.
Yeah. And do you think, given the period we've gone through with COVID, those wider objectives you were talking about, particularly around, the community, mental health issues, and so on, do you think that will kind of stick in a way now going forward in community and grassroots clubs? Do you think that will become more preeminent than it's ever been before?
Yeah, I'd like to hope so. I mean, obviously, you know, I think some of the plus side of things around COVID is that whole community engagement that we've seen, and that people rallying around and wanting to help out in their local areas. You know, that everybody understands the how isolated people have been and the effects it's had on people's well-being, and the fact that they want to get out and they want to be social again. So yeah, it's definitely worth sort of highlighting all those areas. And I think, you know, we'll see, I mean, at the moment there is a lot of funding that is specific to the COVID relief effort, so it is quite difficult for general sports applications, but I think moving forward we'll see more funding geared towards sort of mental well-being, social cohesion, reducing isolation, those types of projects, because, you know, and you know, we've seen the importance of sport as well throughout the whole, you know, even the lockdowns. You know, sport was still prioritised in terms of, or sorry, physical activity was still prioritised as important, and you know, people, I think, understand that they need to be healthy and fit and you know, improve their well-being.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the emotional side of selling sport, which is probably the easiest part to do, particularly people that you know, love their sport. But I guess also you also need to put together information, data. What kind of tips can you give around that in terms of what kind of things could you package up?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the first thing I would say, you know, is really make sure that you read the applications and their guidance notes and what their sort of frequently asked questions they normally have. You know, have a look at what their priorities are and their outcomes are, and look at how your project can meet with that. And if you're really not sure, you know, I would also advocate just giving them a ring and having a chat with them and saying what you're thinking of applying for, and does that meet their criteria, because they should be able to give you a steer on that. Yeah. And also, you know, sort of any insight or data that there is for your local area. So some of the county sports partnerships will provide that information, so you can go on, look at their websites and get that data in terms of what the activity levels are in your area. And also sort of your local authority will have the information around sort of, you know, the demographics in your area, what the ethnicity breakdown is, what the population numbers are, and will also outline what the issues are within that area. So they may say, for example, that you know, the mental health of people within the area is above average or below average, and you can use that sort of information to outline in your application why your project is so important. So it's definitely worth looking at that. And yeah, again, if you've got any accreditations as part of your sport, you know, a club mark or a charter standard, then definitely you need to mention that, because that puts you on a sort of another level above other clubs.
And I guess the local borough councils or county councils have been more than happy to help people go through that process, right? Because it's quite daunting. Certainly from my experience, it can be. So it's good to hear that you feel that the councils are a lot of the information is in, you know, is there, and that they'll be very happy to help.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that obviously the information is there, it's online, it's accessible. The level of help that you'll get will depend on your local authority. I think some are better than others, and some obviously still have a good sports and leisure department that you can tap into, and others perhaps not so much. But that is where you should also link in with your county sports partnership, because obviously they are sports focused and will be able to help. And sometimes they'll actually run check applications for you. Some of them have a checking process. I know they do in London, so that's something worth looking at. And also you have other groups like voluntary service councils as well that will help with funding applications and provide advice, and even, you know, list funds in your local area that it's worth looking out at. Yeah,
great. So where can people go to find the funding? I mean, clearly there's some big pots of money around today, and hopefully that will continue to be the case for years to come. But where would you recommend some of the places to go to find funding right now?
Yeah, I mean, there are a variety of different places to look. Obviously, sorry, the first place I would look is Sport England, in terms of sort of general funding for all. Sorry, shall I start that bit again?
No.
So yeah, so I would definitely look at Sport England in the first instance in terms of sort of a general funding for sport. They normally have sort of small grants up to sort of 10k and a community asset fund. Obviously, because of COVID, some of those have sort of been put on pause and other priorities have come out. But again, you know, fingers crossed, moving forward, they will all come around. Obviously, your local authorities, some of those do small pots of money. Some of them have the community infrastructure levy funding as well, which is also known as SEAL funding, which again can help with capital projects. Again, your county sports partnerships sometimes have funding around, normally around participation projects, so new activities or getting underrepresented groups active. So again, they have various different pots of money. Most areas have a community foundation as well, so it's worth looking at those. And again, a lot of those tend to get sort of donations from sort of various different individuals, and then they coordinate that and allocate those funds in the local areas. But there's also some databases that you can search. So at the moment, there's one called Funding Central, which is going to change shortly to My Funding Central. And it's just a database you can sign up for. You can put your details in, you can search, and it'll come up with a list of grants and different pots that you might want to apply to. It does take some time to sift through. I will say you will get quite a few results, and you'll have to go through those. But it's definitely worth looking at if you've got a specific project that you know you want to get funding for.
Okay, and I guess it makes sense maybe to go not just necessarily go for one type of fund, but maybe go for kind of combinations or more than one fund. So would you say that, I mean, if you were to say now compared to, let's say, maybe 5 years ago, what's the landscape like now in terms of funding compared to then? Is there more money available? Are there more funds available?
It's interesting because before COVID, I was kind of saying to people that actually there's less bigger pots of money for sort of capital projects, but there's lots more smaller pots of money for sort of participation or small equipment costs. Obviously, during COVID, what we saw was a lot of funding bodies putting funding on hold, and obviously, some of those projects that were available couldn't be delivered. But I think we're now starting to see a few more open up, and the normal funding routes come back. So I would hope that we will still see that there'll be lots of sort of smaller pots that people can apply for and access, and hopefully that now people have seen the benefits of sport and activity and physical health, that we might see more funding come on board to try and get us back to where we were in terms of activity and sport. So that's the hope anyway.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm hoping we are going to get more funding than ever, but we'll see. A support and guidance. So as I alluded to earlier, I think most grassroots organisations probably need as much help as they can and much as sort of support as they can get. So are there any particular bodies that you would recommend for them to reach out to, as well as those kind of funding groups and the councils?
Yeah, so there's a couple of organisations that are worth talking about. Obviously, your national governing body, definitely reach out to them and find out what sort of funding they can offer and what support they can offer. Some have development officers that are willing to help and take a bit more of a proactive role. There's also Sported, which is a sports development charity, which tends to sort of focus on using sport to form lives, particularly in urban areas and for underrepresented groups. And they have a number of or a range of support available, such as mentoring and funding bulletins and workshops. So that's worth looking into. And you've also got the Sport England Club Matters website, which is basically a one-stop shop for clubs involved in physical activity and sport, with a range of practical resources and online tools that you can do. They also have workshops, and I actually tutor a number of those workshops, but on a range of different subjects, from club finances to planning for your future, which is around the sort of business planning, to volunteer engagement. And there's a lot of information on there. There's even a survey tool that you can use to sort of survey your members and find out more about, you know, what they think. So if you were going to do a particular project and you wanted to get people's opinions, you could use that tool to move that forward. So there is a range of support out there. Obviously, it's just accessing that support and getting it. So
yeah, that's great. So we'll start to wrap up now. I have a question for you. I mean, even during these challenging times, I mean, do you think the future grassroots funding is going to be positive going forwards? Can you see that?
I would really hope so. I think you know, I think everybody understands the importance of sport and physical activity at the moment, and you know, we've had a massive health crisis, and you know, obviously, you know, funding for the NHS is really important, but that's, you know, that's reflective. It's after the fact. Let's be more preventative. Let's try and, you know, help people to be active and stay fit and well. So I would hope that, you know, something and comes forwards to grassroots sports, and I think more. Once the business community as well gets up and running and gets back on their feet, I think they will want to support grassroots and community activities more, because they will see the benefit in that as well, and the community coming together.
Yeah. So our sports are quite siloed, aren't they? We've got kind of rugby clubs, football clubs, cricket clubs, golf clubs, etc. Can you envisage in the future that through funding and through new developments that actually grassroots sports clubs will start to become more multi-sport? Is that something you also see being a trend or not?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're definitely already starting to see some of that, particularly like with a lot of the Sport England funding is very focused around sort of, you know, multi-sport, not just one sport, and it kind of makes sense if sports can work together to pool their resources and, you know, save on facility costs. You know, it makes sense for them to work together. Obviously, unfortunately, sometimes there is a little bit of a clash of egos and timetabling and that side of things, but I think we all have to sort of kind of get over that, and as long as there's clear agreements and processes in place, then I think, you know, it definitely can work. And you know, there is examples of some really good projects where football and rugby or football and cricket work well together, and you know, even and football, it depends on obviously the size of your facilities and how much space you've got, but it's definitely, I think, you know, the sport coming together for the community in a number of different remits makes sense. Yeah.
Caroline, that's really helpful. I think we'll kind of start to wrap it up there on the funding side of it. We're obviously going to talk in the next interview about the facility development side of it, which I know is also kind of something that there's a lot of investment going into and you have experience on. And we're also going to kind of touch on volunteering after that as well. Thank you very, very much for sharing your experience and your knowledge. Needless to say, if anyone wants to reach out to Caroline, you can probably spot her email address in the background there. And Caroline, is it fair for me to say you'll be happy to answer any questions that might come in?
Yes, I don't mind answering a few questions. That's fine, not a problem.
Okay, great. So once again, thank you very, very much for this, and we will speak again soon.
Yeah, thank you.